A newly appointed police chief was found dead under mysterious circumstances after he vowed to clean up the streets. Hello, true crimeers. This is going to be a true crime in a short-ish amount of time, and this is the case of Robert Hamrick. Viewer discretion is advised. Real quick before we get started, of course, hello, my name is Mike. If you are new to the channel, feel free to subscribe if you are into true crime, because that's what I do. I tell multiple true crime stories here every single week. Short videos, long videos, YouTube shorts, the whole kit and caboodle. No one ever uses that phrase anymore. That's unfortunate. So yeah, subscribe if you want to. Also, you can follow me over on TikTok. I have a couple of pages where I tell true crime stories. The links to those will be found in the description of this video below in the link tree. And also the links will pop up here at some point in the beginning and also at the end of the video. Check it out if you want to. You don't gotta, but you can if you wanna. And then if there is a case you want me to cover, just send me a really quick email with the information like the name of the case, where it happened, when it happened. I'll add it to the list. There's over 5,800 names on that list. I pick my cases off that list at completely random, so I cannot promise you when I'll cover the case you recommend, but I will get to it eventually. But let's get into today's case. All right, okay. Robert Hamrick, who would go by Bobby to everyone in his life. He was born on May 29th, 1940. I don't have a ton of background information on him. I do know that at one point he was a member of the U.S. Army. He was married and they had 3 children together. The family lived in a little village called Rock Creek, which is located in Ohio. In the 60s, Rock Creek, Ohio was being ravaged by a group of just horrible dudes. This huge gang of redneck thugs, as some people would describe them as. These were guys who would ride their motorcycles around town. They would harass the people of the town who were doing nothing to them. They would sometimes be violent. They would threaten a lot of people. They seemed to, for some reason, really own this town. And it was like this large group of guys that just were a bunch of assholes. They would destroy property. They would throw things at people. Like, it's unbelievable that there's a group like that that could just sort of hold power over an entire village or entire town. Police could only do so much, I guess, but these guys felt like they were above the law, and that's how they acted in this town. It's because of this group of thugs that Rock Creek would decide to form their own police department. And they had 2 police chiefs basically come and go very quickly. One would last a brief time, then the next one was hired. They would last a brief time. And then enter Robert Hamrick. He would volunteer as to be the chief of police, and he was sworn in July of 1969. Robert Hamrick was determined that he was going to clean up the streets. He was going to stop this group of scoundrels and just awful people. And he was going to make this community safe to live in, where people could walk outside and not have to worry about these guys. Almost right away, he was dealing with harassment from these men. They would drive up to his house and they would start yelling at him and his wife and his kids, while they're having dinner, basically trying to get Robert to come outside. And sometimes he did. Then the guys would speed away, and then Robert would get into his car and try to chase them. 5 months after he took over the job, he had gotten a tip about an abandoned building that had a stolen car in it, and it was a Corvette. And when he arrived, he confirmed there was a new-looking Corvette in there in perfectly good condition. And what he decided to do was to get another officer and stage essentially a stakeout where they would hide in this building and wait for the men to come back to catch them red-handed. And that's what happened. They hid successfully. The thugs, who were a part of this big group of redneck thugs, they came in and they were promptly arrested by Robert and another officer. I think at least 3 or 4 different members of this gang were arrested in connection with this. And then immediately is when Robert started to get inundated with phone calls at his home. Very threatening phone calls. And sometimes when he wasn't home, his wife would be there, and a couple times she answered the phone, and the person on the other end, in a very creepy voice, said, if he doesn't stop what he's doing, your husband, we're going to hurt him, and we're going to hurt him really, really bad. At times, essentially, it sounded like they were threatening to kill him. Why they weren't ever, like, just arrested and all grouped up, and I don't know. I honestly have no idea. There's not a ton of information, like background info on this story. Because it sounds like these guys were known criminals committing, at the very least, public indecency, or they were public nuisances, and you could at least arrest them for small things, but for some reason they just never were. And then on March 10th, 1970, everything came to a head. Robert Hamrick was in his patrol car, and there was a car that sped past him, almost deliberately, it seemed like to him, and he began to chase him. Robert would radio in to headquarters, hey, I'm pursuing this vehicle. He described the vehicle, and he said, I'm going to try to catch this guy. And then all of a sudden, radio contact from Robert was done. It was over. He never responded or called back on the radio again. The dispatch would reach out to the local sheriff's department, and they would say, hey, can you please be on the lookout for our police chief in his car, because we have lost contact with him. 4 hours after Robert last made contact with the station, the sheriff's department would find his vehicle. Robert had, it appeared, crashed into a tree. There was some pretty bad, significant damage to the hood of his car, the front, and Robert himself was slouched over in his seat with a lot of blood kind of on the back of his head. There was no broken glass anywhere in the car. None of the windows shattered. However, what the coroner determined was that Robert Hamrick had some extreme injuries to the back of his head. The back half of his head, his skull, was caved in. It was crushed. And the coroner initially ruled this an accident, which is unbelievable because there was no, if he crashed, according to the scene, he crashed head-on into this tree. Yet there's no, blood or injuries to the front, but he had significant crushing blows to the back of his head. And how do you hit the tree that hard and get those injuries and not a single window breaks? It just seems very strange. They had found a lot of blood in the back of the car where blood should not have been. Also of note, Robert's service revolver and his nightstick that he always had on him were nowhere in the car. They were stolen. They were gone. Missing. They weren't at his house. They weren't at the station. They weren't anywhere. Somebody took them. Who did that? The other thing they noticed that they felt was strange was that the ignition was turned off and the lights and everything in the car was turned off. They thought to themselves, well, why would Robert make note to turn off everything and have the ability to do that, but not use his radio, which was still working, they confirmed. Why would he not use his radio at that point to radio for help if he was able to turn off the car? Now, Robert initially was not pronounced dead at the scene. He did actually survive for 10 additional days, but he was in a coma the entire time. He never once regained consciousness, and then he died 10 days later. Unfortunately, he was never able to provide any information about what happened to him because he never woke up. And another thing I'm confused by is how no one official-wise said, this is definitely a murder. We got to investigate this like a murder, because I was watching the Unsolved Mysteries episode about this, and they had several different police officers or sheriff's people who were interviewed who all seemed to think that this was definitely a murder, that this was like some kind of retaliation murder from this group of thugs. But why did nobody actually step in and say, this is not an accident, we need to investigate this, we need to arrest people? It seems kind of strange. There doesn't appear to be a lot of info on the reason for that. But it was labeled an accident, and that was basically the end of it. The following day after the initial incident, another police officer saw the exact vehicle that Robert described he was chasing at a local gas station. That vehicle had been dropped off earlier before Robert had gotten involved in this incident by a woman. The woman left the car at this gas station, for repairs and whatnot. But when the officer arrived the day after the incident, the vehicle had a couple flat tires. There was mud caked all over the sides. And the woman who owned this car said, well, when I dropped it off, I didn't have any flat tires and there was no mud on my car. It was perfectly clean. The people who worked at that gas station, several of them were members of this gang. And it appeared that one of the gang members was actually working on the car when the officer noticed it the following day. Again, why was this not investigated more thoroughly? It sounds like this woman dropped off her car to be fixed, and these guys used her car in order to lure Robert away on some kind of high-speed chase to get him out to this kind of quiet and desolate location to cause harm to him. And then, I guess, police would interview a couple of these thugs, and actually one of them admitted that he was driving the car. That he was driving the car around and admitted he was being chased by Robert Hamrick that night. But then he says, well, I had nothing to do with what happened to him. I got away from him, and just whatever happened to him on his own. And again, nothing happened. They didn't do anything about it. Several months, I think, after Robert's death, a woman would come forward, and she remained anonymous, and she always has been anonymous about this. She heard from not just one, but at least 3 or 4 different members of this gang that they had been boasting and bragging and laughing and joking about killing Robert Hamrick, that they were in fact responsible for it. What she overheard them say was that they in fact did lure him away using a car that a customer dropped off at the gas station. They lured him away with the intent of getting him to a quiet location where they got him out of his car. They accosted him. They basically ganged up on him, pulled him out of the car, and beat him with his own nightstick and crushed the back of his head. And then they staged the car crash to make it look like he was in an accident, then put him back in the car to look like he just crashed his car, and that was it. His nightstick has never been found. His gun has never been found. That nightstick was probably the weapon that was used to kill him. And now, here we are in 2024. No one has ever been arrested. No one has ever been charged. Robert's wife believes he was murdered. Robert's children, who at the time of the Unsolved Mysteries episode were adults, both believed, based on the evidence and the circumstances around this, that he was murdered. And that's the craziest part, is that the circumstances around this is exactly why they should have investigated this as a homicide from the get-go. He was cleaning up the streets. He was adamant he was going to do it. He kind of stood up to this gang. He arrested several of their members. They harassed him and his family that they were going to hurt him or possibly kill him, and then he ends up dead. Hello? What else do you need? But that's the end of this story. That's the end. That's it. There is nothing else. The only thing that has changed recently over the years is that I'm not sure exactly when they changed this, to be honest with you, but the Ohio Attorney General's website has officially changed Robert Hamrick's death from accidental to unsolved homicide. So they are now acknowledging that he was murdered. However, are they investigating this? I don't know. There doesn't appear to be any updates. There's very little coverage of his case. And Robert Hamrick, he just was killed and he died, and his family lost him forever, and nobody seems to want to do anything about it. That's insane to me. This happened in 1970. This is, over 50 years ago? The people who did this to him are very, very old, or possibly very, very dead. And there probably will never be arrests in this case. I mean, some of them might still be alive, and some of them could still potentially be arrested for it, but are they going to? Are they going to actually look into this and arrest someone and hold someone accountable for it? I mean, let's be real, probably not. Never say never, because there is always that chance. But March 10th, 1970 was Robert Hamrick's end of watch. He died in pursuit of the thugs that likely killed him. Robert Hamrick was someone who vowed to seek justice, to hold people accountable, to arrest criminals. And what's most unfortunate is that nobody seems to want to work to get Robert Hamrick the justice he rightfully deserves. But that is the end of this case. True crime, Rooney Dooney Dingleberry Dons. I hope you found it interesting. As usual, please subscribe, give the video a like so more people can see it. Follow me over on TikTok. Recommend a case to my email address. Yeah. That's it for this video. I am losing my voice, and so I'm gonna stop talking now. So not my normal silly goodbye. I'll try next time. But yeah, so I will see you guys for the next video, and until then, ta-ta for now. True crime, Rooney Dooney Dingleberry Dons. Yeah, see? No, see? Yeah, see. Okay.